Welcome to Abergavenny Baptist Church.
Life, faith, together.
Well, we're now going to be having our Bible reading. And so if you could take your Bibles, open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. We're still working our way through the Sermon on the Mount. So Matthew chapter 5 and verses 33 to 37. And Job is going to be reading the Bible to us this morning.
Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the oaths that you have made." But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Thank you.
I have never had sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. I've never had an affair with her. The infamous words by the then U.S. President Bill Clinton under oath. Of course, later, he admitted he had made a mistake, that he regretted it, and he asked for forgiveness. And of course, everyone was shocked. The U.S. president lacks integrity? Shock. Of course, that's because it was back in 1998. In today's culture of, or post-truth culture, in a world of fake news, I think we would be even more shocked if we found out that the president was telling the truth. But it's not only Bill Clinton and U.S. presidents that struggle with integrity. I'm sure we've all had that experience of buying something online and discovering that the seller's definition of excellent condition is not the same as yours. And we've all experienced those promises that never quite live up to what we thought they meant. And we've met those people who we know you can never always trust their word. But sometimes, if we are to be really honest, I think we have to admit that we are sometimes those people. And today, Jesus addresses this topic of integrity. And he continues his teaching using the regular formula. And we read in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 33, Jesus says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath.' Sometimes it's translated as, 'Do not swear falsely, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.'" So here, Jesus doesn't quote the Old Testament directly, but rather he gives a summary of the Old Testament's position about taking oaths. And for example, in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 7, this is from the Ten Commandments. This is one of the commands. It says, "You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name." How do you misuse God's name? By taking an oath in his name and saying, "I promise in the name of God that this is true," or "I promise in the name of God that I will do this," and it's either a lie or you fail to do it. That's misusing the name of God. And the intention of the command is quite simple. It's to ensure that you are a person of your word, that you are honest, that you are a person of integrity. And in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 12, it says, "Do not swear falsely by my name." To swear falsely means to make a false promise, to lie. So do not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. Again, the intention is to ensure that we are people of integrity, that we are a person of our word, that what we say is what we mean. Now, the Pharisees, in the time of Jesus, that the Pharisees wanted to safeguard themselves, to make sure that they would never use the name of the Lord falsely, to make sure they would never profane the name of the Lord. So what they would do in order to safeguard themselves is when they made an oath, they would never actually use the name of God. Rather, what they would do, they would use another word that represented God. And so, for example, they would say, I swear by God's throne. Or I swear by the gold of the temple. Or I swear by the gift on the altar. And these phrases were used as a substitute for God's name. And so this would protect them in case they accidentally were lying, or in case they never actually got around to fulfill what they said. Then it wouldn't be so bad because they didn't actually use God's name. Okay, how hypocritical is that? But it gets even better. They had a further opt-out clause. Because it says that you mustn't swear falsely in God's name, they thought it was okay to swear falsely in anyone else's name. So if you say, I promise, I swear by my father, or I swear by my mother that this is true, you weren't bound to that agreement because you didn't use God's name. You were only bound if you used God's name. And now this is where it gets really interesting because they avoid using God's name, they don't actually use God's name, they use substitute words that represent God, right? And because it's completely arbitrary, there's an arbitrary distinction between the words that actually represented God and the words that didn't. So, I mean, they just kind of made it up. And so, for example, if you swore by the temple, that's not binding. But if you swore by the gold of the temple, that was binding. If you swore by heaven, not binding. You swore by the throne of heaven, binding. If you swore by the altar, not binding. You swore by the gift on the altar, binding. Okay, I mean, don't ask me why. That's just the rules they just made up. And you can read all about this in Matthew chapter 23 if you really want to. Now, I can just imagine the scene of a disgruntled person, a customer, returning to the salesman and saying, you swore that this camel was the best camel this side of the Nile. You swore that this camel would live for at least another 10 years. It barely got beyond the Jordan. And you swore that if this camel died before 10 years, you would give me 2 camels. To which the salesperson replies, but I swore by the temple, not by the gold of the temple, that this camel would live for 10 years. And I swore by heaven, not by the throne of God, that I would give you 2 camels if this camel died. I'm not bound to this agreement. I mean, it kind of feels like it's just childish. You know, like when children, they're playing in the playground and a child will promise to do something. They'll back it up with an oath and say, I cross my heart and hope to die, only to reveal that they had their fingers crossed behind their back. A common device that it means you don't have to keep your promise. Unfortunately, many people grow up with their fingers permanently crossed behind their back. We shouldn't be too quick to laugh at the Pharisees and children, because we so often do very similar things in just more complicated ways. We have our own loopholes, our own fingers crossed behind the back, looking at the fine print in a contract, and so on. Why do people break promises and lie? Well, sometimes people break promises simply because they are dishonest. But often it's because of inconvenience. You make a promise, but then Circumstances change, your mood changes, and all of a sudden, now it becomes really inconvenient for you. Other times, we break promise because we're a people pleaser. Someone desperately needs to hear the truth, but you don't have the heart to tell them because you like to be liked. You want to please them. And they will say, well, what did you think of it? And you go, I thought it was nice. I liked it. When actually you should be saying, don't ever do that again. But you don't have the heart to tell them because you want to please them. Or you say, I would love to go, but we're away. But you're not. Other times we lie because we like to control people. We want to get our own way. I mean, why do people swear an oath? It's to persuade the other person that what you're saying is true, or persuade the other person to do what you want them to do. It's to add weight to your argument, to help them change their mind and their judgment. It's to get your own way. And it's a form of manipulation, and sometimes it's simply deceitful. Therefore, Jesus says in verse 34 to 36, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. And so Jesus is effectively saying God is involved in every vow, every promise, everything you say, whether you've used his name or not. You know, God has created everything, and God is everywhere. So this whole distinction about what name you're using is immaterial. God is involved in every promise you make. Secondly, Jesus forbids oath-taking altogether. Because God is involved in every promise you make, there's simply no need to make an oath, to swear to God. He's already involved. And of course, Jesus is saying, look, don't even bother about it, because he's realized the whole system's become corrupt. And it's been used to create loopholes and cross behind your back. And so he says, don't do it at all. Rather, as a follower of Jesus, we should always speak the truth, and we should never break a promise. That's why Jesus says in verse 34, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. And in verse 37, he says, all you need to say is simply yes or no. If you're a follower of Jesus, you should always speak the truth. You should never break a promise. And so you'll never need to swear an oath. And you should live in such a way that no one would ever dream of saying to you, do you promise? That they would never even dream of asking you that question, because they know you are a person of your word, that your yes is yes and your no is no. Now, of course, some Christians have taken this to mean that Jesus is saying we should never, in court, swear an oath in a law court. But Jesus himself takes an oath in a court of law. In Matthew chapter 26 and verse 63, we read, the high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And under oath, Jesus replies, you have said so. So to think Jesus is saying you should never take an oath in a law court is to take Jesus way too literally. The point that Jesus is making is that you should never need to take an oath to convince people. You should never need to say, I swear to God, this is true. You should be such a person of integrity that people just trust you for what you say, that your yes is yes and your no is no. Of course, this does not mean that you can't or shouldn't take an oath in a court of law if you're required to by a court of law. Now, of course, today, it's not an oral culture like it was in the day of Jesus. Today is a literacy culture, and so contracts and legal documents have superseded the need for many oaths back in Jesus' day. But still the principle remains. Are you a person of integrity? Or do you swear falsely? Perhaps you made a commitment to do something, but then suddenly the circumstances change and now it's really inconvenient for you. Do you look for those loopholes? Make those excuses? Oh, I never signed a contract. Oh, I'm not feeling really well. Is that your loophole? Is that your fingers crossed behind your back to get out of it? Are you economical with the truth? Do you say half-truths in order to get your own way at work, at school, at home, amongst your friends? How often do we say yes to something with no real intention of following it through? How often do we say, we will pray for you, but we don't? Are you economical with the truth, or are you a person of integrity? Someone who is not two-faced, someone who acts the same in private as they do in public, someone who is a person of their word, who can be trusted. You see, as a follower of Jesus, we should be known as people who don't even need to sign a contract because their word is their bond. Their yes is yes and their no is no. They mean what they say and they say what they mean. As followers of Jesus, we're called to be different from the world. We're called to be salt and light. We're called to be people of integrity, to be true to our word, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's costly. But how? How can we be people of integrity? Firstly, by receiving God's forgiveness. None of us speaks the truth all the time. None of us are perfect in this area. Yet Jesus was. His yes was yes, and his no was no. And on the cross, he died so that dishonest people like us could be forgiven, and so that he could make us into people of integrity. Secondly, by realizing that Jesus is always present with us. Nothing is hidden from him. He sees us even when no one else does, and he knows our heart completely. And yet he loves you, and he's there to help you. And then thirdly, living to please Jesus. We don't live to please ourselves, because that will make us controlling. We don't live to please others, because then we'll end up just being people pleasers. We live to please Jesus. And that makes us people of integrity. And we'll become known as people who do not even need to say, I promise, I swear, because people will know that we are people of integrity. We are people of our word. Our yes is yes, and our no is no. There's a story of a clerk in a department store, and one day he receives a phone call, and it's for the owner. And so he says to the owner, it's for you. And the owner says, tell them I'm not here. He says to the owner, you tell them yourself. And he hands him the phone. The owner obviously was furious with the clerk. He took the call, but he remained furious with his clerk. Later, the clerk replied to his owner, if I can lie for you, I can lie to you. And from that day on, the owner had the highest regard for and trust in that clerk.
Thank you for watching.
For more information, please visit our website, abergavenybaptist.co.uk.